Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first American Scouser TV Fantasy Premier League show of 2024. You will be the last person I say Happy New Year's to. Happy New Year's, Matish.
Happy New Year. I hope you had a wonderful time celebrating with your lovely wife, and I hope that you continue to fall behind and watch me as I continue to climb.
Yeah, we'll let you have that moment for maybe
a month,
a little bit, a couple weeks or so. I got a feeling we're going to talk a lot about strategy tonight, and I genuinely do believe that we're going to watch your strategy blow up in your face and watch it negatively impact you greatly as you tumble from your top 40,000 in the world. But we always start with taking a quick overall look at our American Scouser Cup standings. Oh, I jumped way too many slides here.
That's a nice team right there.
Yeah, we don't need to look at that team. We'll get there eventually. Hopefully, we'll run out of time. No, big moves here. Great week by you, obviously. 91 points above the green arrow line, especially it being a high week. You made the right call with Salah as your captain, obviously. That was a big one for you. And you made the big move. Alice in Wonderland sat right around the mark. Slight move up, top 5,000 in the world, nothing to shake at. And unused substitute, still hanging in the top 10,000. And then it's you in third place, my man. So, this is where it gets difficult because it's a lot harder to make moves when you get inside the top 50,000. I learned that a few years back when I had the back-to-back seasons where I hovered around 10K from about January on. You really have to either gamble or you just have to play the template every week, make the same transfers as everyone else every week, and get your captaincy picks right, and then hope you play your chips well. Even that, though, is really probably only going to get you into the top, 20 to top 10,000. From there, you really have to make your moves with differentials. If you really wanted to, make a run at the top 5, top 6, get into single-digit thousands. But let's get to 25,000 before we start talking about getting you anywhere higher than that. I do want to say, if you are watching us right now on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And if you would like to, feel free to drop questions, pictures of your team, comments in the chat, and we will try to answer them throughout the program. Obviously, my wife, Kelly, she's doing well as well, hovering inside the top 100,000. She was frustrated. She went back and forth between captaining Mo and ultimately landed on Son. He still got a return, but it wasn't the same. So it kind of frustrated her as she saw herself fall back a little bit, especially fall back from you a little bit. And really excited, though. Doesn't really love her team, as we'll talk about a little later, because she was asking for a little guidance today. She's got a lot. She's almost at a point where she could rip the wild card. But it's just too early, in my opinion, to be using a chip that important. Because I think with a little bit of team surgery and 2-3 transfers, you can make those moves. So let's go ahead here. Start how we always do with a little discussion topic. AFCON and the Asian Cup. Obviously, some really big players leaving the game. 3 on the screen right here. Maybe 3 of the midfielders that are in top form. In Mohamed Kudus, Mohamed Salah, and of course, Tottenham's captain and talisman, Heung-min Son. Also, Hwang Hee-chan from Wolves. Who are the others? Onana at United. There are a few other players. There aren't too many this year, I don't think. There aren't as many as there are in years past. So, how many of the AFCON and Asian Cup players do you have to worry about currently in your side? Is it 2 or 3?
Had 2 to worry about until yesterday when I decided to make a move quickly to not lose any more money potentially, because knowing with how many people were going off Son and Salah, I had to make some sort of a move to keep a little bit of money. I know it's just 0.1 or 0.2 potentially, but you never know when you can use that 0.1 or 0.2 towards the end of the year. So I went off of Hwang Hee-chan last week. Unfortunately, it really didn't do much for me, and it is what it is. It is. I think the big thing is I have to remember, and people have to remember as well. If you're making transfers for just the 1 week return, you're not going to have a good team by the end of the year, right? You have to do these transfers that you feel confident in over the next 3-4 weeks. Because if you just end up bouncing from player to player within the same position all the time, you're not doing yourself a favor. You're just putting yourself in a bigger hole as you do that. So ultimately, yes, would I have enjoyed having more of a return from who did I even bring in for Bowen? Yeah, Jared Bowen. Sorry. And I feel fine about Bowen, especially moving forward. So it's not something I'm going to be too upset about. And having a good week like I did, I guess it made it easier to swallow. I think if I had a poor week, I'd be a little bit more upset with my choice. And so kind of moving forward a little bit, just because we're on the topic though, I did move down from Son to Gross. I felt like
that's gross because he's been on my team and you literally just snaked my differential.
Well, now it's going to be great because he's on my team. He knows he's got to put up points now. It's going to be perfect. And so
wonderful.
I didn't want to move down from Mo quite yet because I'm really torn between going to De Bruyne or going to Foden. Honestly, I think I'm stuck between one of the City mids. I just don't really – I want to see City play once with De Bruyne back in the lineup for real before I make that switch. So I felt more comfortable going off of Son because I knew the funds were there. So yeah, other than that, I don't have anyone else in AFCON or in Asia that are going away. So I'm in a pretty good spot. What about you?
Excuse me. I only have Salah to worry about. I don't have Heung-min Son, so I guess I have that to worry about on most weeks, which is probably why I'm so far behind you. But I don't have the player. Kelly has him and Salah, and still has Diaby in her side, and defenders that need to be moved like Livramento, and I mean she's just got one of those unbalanced sides. And a player like Isak that's just so hot and cold. Like I feel bad because the moves she should make are just move off Son and Salah like you talked about. But, I think there is some strategy, and that's where I wanted to start before we even talk about the best players to replace Son and Salah. Because let's be honest, if you brought in Kudus in the last couple of weeks, like you've got a lot of points, but if you had to just stash him on the bench, you could. Like if you like him as a long-term play, I wouldn't even recommend moving off players that are under 7 million. You can afford them, especially if you've been playing, especially if your plan is to sell one of the big guns and go get Haaland, because then you're probably going to be playing a 3-4-3 over the next few weeks. And if you're playing a 3-4-3 and you're forced to bench a midfielder, why do you have then, to be theoretically honest, you could stash Son or Mo. And I know what you're saying about the 0.1s, right? But I've also been reading a bunch of the top managers saying they're going to actually stash at least one of them on the bench for at least a week or two to see how their sides fare. Like, there's a chance that Egypt could go and play poorly and not get out of the group stage, and Mo could be back. And that's my one concern. Is that I'm making a transfer, I'm sending on a player, I'm going to sell him at 12.8 or 12.9, and I have to buy him back at 13.4, 13.5. And that's where I'm going to lose the value of my squad, more than just the 0.1. So in some ways, you're actually retaining value in your squad by holding on to these players, even with a few drops. Now, when Son and Mo both dropped in the same night, made me nervous. I won't lie, I thought the same thing. And then it's just like, I always get nervous because anytime I make these types of transfers, the guy I go and get transferred, like if I had done what you did 48 hours ago, right, I probably would have brought in Elise, and I'd have a guy with an injury right now that's probably not going to play because he got hurt. Right. Or I might have brought in Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and then he gets a red card and he's suspended for 3 weeks, for 3 matches. So it's like, with all these fixtures still to come in the FA Cup, it makes me nervous knowing that it's not like we're 48 hours from deadline. I got to make transfers with a full week out, and it's like it kind of does give me kind of a little bit of agita on not knowing what to do there. I understand why you rip the move, and I do understand the move. I don't disagree with the move, but I think for most managers, probably a little bit of patience on this one to at least get through the FA Cup matches. Especially if you're buying a big player, like my plan is to buy a player that will probably be fodder and or rotation, to replace Mo, and that will let me get to Holland off Morris, and then I can basically go Holland, Solanke, and Watkins through this entire period. And in that case, I feel confident and comfortable because I still have Saka, Palmer, Odegaard, in my midfield, along with can't even remember. We'll get there in a little bit. So, best players for you in the midfield. I mentioned Michael Olise so far. Underlying stats over the last month, he's probably the best overall player. Who else would you say you think are the good midfield options, both in the long and short term? And what maybe are the concerns you have? I know you mentioned a couple of City midfielders already, De Bruyne and Foden.
Yeah, and that's, with City midfielders and City wingers, you're always going to get the same pep roulette, unless you've got some injuries and you don't have to worry about rotation as much. But with everyone getting healthy again, it's going to be difficult to know which winger Pep goes with. Does he go with Grealish? Does he go with Doku? Then does he go with Foden? And if KDB and Holland are playing, is there a room for Alvarez? And so you've got all those questions all the time. So unless there's, I guess, a pattern that we're seeing, it's going to be tough to nail down a City mid. And that's why I kind of want to see how they're going to be when KDB gets back, just to get an idea and a taste of what they might bring. I think outside of the City mids, I mean, little bias, obviously, but Pascal Gross, I think, is a good shout. I think if you're still not on Cole Palmer, you're not paying attention to anything. And you're sort of just kicking yourself in the nuts because he is incredibly cheap. He's on penalties. He's Chelsea's best player right now by far over the last 3 weeks. I mean, maybe you could say Enzo Fernandez has been really good as well, but from an attacking standpoint, Palmer's definitely the way to go. Jared Bowen, I know is a pretty nice replacement for Son because you drop just about $1 million, so you can save $1 million and use that elsewhere possibly. And maybe a slight shout for James Maddison coming back because he's going to be also in that realm. If you want to come down from Son and you feel like Spurs, the attacking Spurs, you're still going to get the possibility for returns and you're not so big on Richarlison, then Maddison could be a sneaky good shout there to maybe as some sort of a differential. Outside of that, I'm looking at some of the midfielders here on the side, and apart from the names that you've already named, the popular ones, there isn't a name that screams at me that is worth pulling the trigger on outside of who we've mentioned already.
Yeah, I think if I were me, well, Maddison is still not back in training, so it sounds like he won't be ready for match week 21. And I don't think I would be comfortable going to a guy that, if I'm going to move off Son, I think either avoid Spurs or you go with Richarlison. I mean, he is hot. He's in form. His underlying numbers are just as good as Son's, if not better, over the last 4 or 5 match weeks. He's, I think, scored in 3 straight. Seems to be hitting his stride. And he is a guy over his career in England has always been a very streaky goal scorer, both at Watford, at Everton, and now obviously showing it to start for finally at Spurs. So I think Richarlison, now let me ask you this. Any concerns, and I know you have Bowen, but any concerns over the fact that, City or that West Ham will be without Bowen or without Kudus, and it looks like Paqueta could be is injured and could be out for a little bit. And then you flip that around, similar concerns about, say, Kulusevski, Brennan Johnson, and Richarlison with no Son being there. Any concerns about those teams, even Mo not being at Liverpool? Are Liverpool assets a little questionable because Mo's not there for everyone to put their attention towards?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a little bit of that. I think, obviously, the teams need to adjust the way they play. I think in Bowen's case, he is still, whether Paqueta is healthy or not, I think most things still run through Bowen. I know that Paqueta picks up the ball and he operates that space, operates that 10 really well. But I think most of the game goes through Bowen anyway, and he is going to be on penalties, most likely. So I'm not too worried about that. As far as the Liverpool assets go, that's going to be a little trickier because we haven't, outside of Mo, we haven't seen a consistent threat. Darwin gets in positions and he feels like he's going to come up with several returns every single game, but ends up disappointing you a bit. Jota, we don't know how much he's going to play at any given point. He might play 10, he might score 2, or he might play 65 and he disappears on the pitch. So it's hard to really get a sense of that. Luis Diaz, again, another guy who has just been so hot and cold the last 12 months, really. So, yeah, I think there's always going to be a little worry when you don't have the guy, when you don't have Son, when you don't have Mo, when you don't have Paqueta and Kudus. So I think it's going to be really important to see how these teams play the first week during this break and kind of get a sense of where they're at. At the end of the day, I think the returns have to come from somewhere, and I have much more confidence in Owen than, let's say, an Anthony Elanga at Forest, right? I mean, just thinking about the quality of player and where they're at, it just feels more comfortable knowing that if there is a return to happen, it's probably going to come from here.
So what is your plan because it does sound like you're reinvesting the funds? What will you will continue to play a 3-5-2? What is your plan to get Mo back?
So that's where I'm at right now I might just sit on Mo for another week and kind of see what happens. Again, I'm waiting to see how the KDB thing goes when he comes back fully. I'm at a 3-4-3 right now, honestly. Because Mo is red flagged, obviously. So my strategy right now is to just hold Mo for another week. I'm gonna revisit it, especially we have so much time. We pretty much have a month for 2 fixtures right now. So there's a lot of time in between, and I don't want to. I know I went early on Gross to maybe pocket a little bit of change here and there, and maybe it was a little bit of a jump on my end, but I'm comfortable sitting and waiting to see how everything plays out and not necessarily having to worry about that at the moment, to be honest.
Well, I mean, you have the luxury because you don't intend to bring in Haaland. So,
Yeah.
I mean, for that, I think you have that luxury that most people are using the Mo funds to secure Haaland. And I mean, with the reports and the pictures of him actually in full training today, if he's full training on January 4th, he's going to play. And now they're talking that there's a potential double match week for City in January to make up the match against Brentford. Right. So if we get that, now you're talking, now you have to be careful because now effective ownership you probably see Haaland triple captain.
Yeah.
And that's a scary proposition if he goes and drops 4 or 5 goals over 2 matches.
That would be that's going to be the week that's going to make or break my rank this year. I think that's what it's going down to. And
true.
And I'm okay with that because I've loved this non-Haaland experiment and I'm happy to continue it.
Well, just try the non-Mo experiment for the second half of the season. We'll see how your green arrow goes. I get it. I've told you before. I think it's kamikaze. I think it's literally suicide or bomber with a jacket. And like it's the suicide or bomber with the jacket, and you're giving the detonator to like your neighbor who doesn't like you. Like it's like it's literally the worst concoction, in my opinion, you could put together. But I wish you the best of luck with it. I personally think that the City fixtures are just too good right now to overlook Haaland. I do question whether or not, we have to go to the 3-4-3 or 3-5-2. I think there's still an option to be in the 3-5-2. You just probably then, you can't have Watkins. You really can't have Watkins, Solanke, and Haaland. It just doesn't make sense. It's just because you're going to want one of them sitting just about any match week. Solanke's got a couple tough fixtures coming up, but Bournemouth still has a good run. You know, one of the things that I wanted to look at here, I thought we'd look at was, as we've done in the past, is the actual fixture ticker before we look at the top folks coming in. Brighton, top of the table, and I've sorted this on attack, primarily because I feel like, yes, we can talk about defenses, and there's been a little swell and swift movement of defenders starting to score a little bit again, especially with Areola's 3 straight, monster weeks for West Ham. But really, when you're talking about 5 midfielders, 3 attacking players, you're really talking about needing 7 out of your 8 attackers. So I figured we'd focus on the attack. Brighton, Manchester United, and Villa at the top. I think we'll see a lot of investment in Brighton between Estupiñán, Gross. I think Pedro will get more and more as he gets more minutes and if he continues to bag goals. Did upset me greatly that, I pick up Gross and they decide to start Pedro and he gets 2 penalties. Bastard. So that was painful in itself. As far as the Liverpool shout, I think Jota is actually one to watch. I think Jota could be a really good differential for this month because I think, to your point, I think he is going to be where Liverpool relies on scoring the game-winning goals and the big goals they need. At the same time, I could see him starting 2 of those 6 matches and still leading the team in goals. And do I want a guy that I'm investing 7.7 in that isn't guaranteed 90 or even a start for me? That part kind of bothers me. Yeah. And then, of course, you have the teams at the bottom, the Burnleys, the Forest, the Bournemouths, teams that I'm not going anywhere near. So let me ask you this. Any interest whatsoever? And I've seen some big name fantasy pundits saying this is their move. Do you have any interest in jumping on gambling on Ivan Toney? Sorry. It took 8 months. I was waiting to get that pun out there.
I was wondering if you were going to go that route. I have to respect that because that was a very, very long thought out joke right there. No, I don't like Brentford's fixtures. Their form is horrible. I don't think Tony's going to be enough to bring them back into form, especially when you have Spurs, City, Wolves, Liverpool, West Ham. That is just a very rough 5 weeks right there. I would sooner go for Højlund than I would for Tony. And that's saying something.
That is saying a lot. Would you be more comfortable if I told you by match week 28, Tony might be having Forest, Liverpool, West Ham, Burnley, and Newcastle as his remaining fixtures for the next 5 weeks?
That gets even better, doesn't it? No, that sounds awful. I don't know what's going on in Brentford right now. They don't look good. They look disjointed. And Mbeumo being out hurts, and they concede a lot. Yes, I think there's room for them to score, but I do not feel good about Tony at all. I don't know if it's just the lack of playtime the last 8 months or if it's just Brentford's form at all. I am staying off that train for sure.
Not a big surprise to me here. We won't spend too much time here because I want to spend some time on your team and then talk a little strategy around mine. No big surprise for me with the transfers in this week: Palmer, Bowen, Foden, Alexander-Arnold, Saka. It almost you can almost line them up with the guys going out. The reason there's so many people going into Alexander-Arnold is because so many people went off of Trippier, had funds to spend in defense, and also moved off of Salah and Son and had funds to reinvest. And right now, Alexander-Arnold is basically allowing you to start a 6 midfielder while playing in defense. And he's scoring. His underlying numbers are outstanding. You mentioned Bowen earlier. Palmer should be the highest rated player. He should be the 2nd or 3rd highest owned player. It blows my mind that as few people still don't own him. Once again, and I'm not just saying this, I had the armband on him with less than a half hour before the deadline and chickened out and switched it to Watkins. So 2 weeks ago, I went off of Solanke, and last week I went off of of Palmer. Both weeks I would have had the armband on the player who scored the most points of any fantasy player in that week. And both times, like, we talked about it during the week, and I wanted to do it, and just couldn't. I couldn't stick with it because I just get so nervous that I'm going to get caught up in some rotation with a guy like Palmer. And he's going to get a day off, and I just knew that there was no way Villa wasn't going to play. Watkins coming off that disappointing result against United where they gave up the goal. So just a kind of a kick in the pants on that one. Players going out, obviously, Salah, Son, Hechan, and Kudus are all Exodus. And Trippier, you think that's about both a mixture of form and Newcastle's clean sheets drying up? Do you think that has to do with the flag that they're talking about him possibly missing a match, or does it have to do with Manchester City coming at the weekend and not wanting a $7 million player on your bench?
Yeah, he, outside of the United game in game week 14, he scored a total of 5 points in 8 games. And when you're investing that much money in there, I think we talked about it a little bit last week too. It's form plus price. It doesn't make sense. They're playing, at least I think they're home against City. So I mean, St. James's Park isn't necessarily a fortress, but at least it's better than going to the Etihad. But then they're away to Villa, and then they're playing Luton, which Luton is, they're not winning a ton of games, but they are playing teams well. And so it's not a rollover game by any means. So I think overall Newcastle is really getting hurt by the amount of fixtures they had. I think this is something that we talked about. I know it's something that Timothy and I talked about in the morning show. When you're a club that hasn't been used to so many fixtures coming at you so often, and all of a sudden you have a team that isn't so deep and you need to play these guys 180 minutes every week, it starts to really pile on. And I think they're really starting to feel that. Will they go out and reinvest this summer and, get deeper? Probably. But if they miss out on Europe this year, I mean, I don't know how much more reinvestment they would want this summer necessarily. So obviously that's a conversation for a different day. But right now there's not much. I still have Anthony Gordon on my team because if a goal is going to come, that's going to come from Isak or Gordon at this point, I think. So at least there's that of it. But yeah, Trippier just doesn't make sense for the amount of money he is.
Well, it can't make sense because he's in my side, and nothing in my side at this point makes much sense. So obviously, not a terrible week by any means, having 77 points. It was just really the Arsenal defenders and Liverpool. It was really Saliba and Alexander-Arnold letting me down. And then blanks from Solanke and Gross and Odegaard, Porro, that really hurt me. When you get 11, 18, 7, 16, and 8 from your captain, you usually feel pretty good about your week. And you throw a 7 in there. It just didn't make sense. It felt all week long like, oh, this will be fine. I'll be fine. I'll rebound. And, when the game started happening, as we got closer and closer to the end of the match week, I realized, man, I'm still not going to be able to keep this up. But I was okay with it. I didn't make any moves the week before, so I have the 2 transfers this week. I'm actually, no, I did. I had transferred in. I brought in Gross for someone. I don't remember who it was. I moved out. But I'd had 2 because I wanted to make sure I had 2 for this week in case I wanted to bring Holland back in. I won't lie. I've been toying around with the idea of taking a hit this week and moving on from Trippier, Morris, and Mo, going Holland. I was going to go Holland, either Richarlison or Bowen, like a bigger mid, and then bring my defender down because I'm very comfortable playing Alexander-Arnold, Porro, and Saliba every single week. Mm-hmm. But then I started thinking to myself, like, what am I doing? I'm bringing in a midfielder, and I just brought in Gross because I want him to play. I love his fixtures. Am I going to sit Odegaard? Am I going to sit Saka or Palmer? And I just started kind of getting in my own head in a little bit of a way. So I think what I'm going to do is hold on to Trippier for one more week, stash him on the bench, and then go Morris all the way up to Holland and take Mo down to Sarabia. from Wolves. He's 4.7.
Yeah,
He's
nice.
projected to score more points than basically almost all midfielders up to about the $6 million range that start on a regular basis over the next 5-6 weeks. I don't mind having him on my side, even as a fifth midfielder long term, if he's a fodder player, if I decide to stay with the three. And it doesn't make me take a hit this week just to move off a player that probably one of the three players I bring in will be sitting on my bench. And that kills me to think about taking a hit to, and it gets me out from under Morris, who's, no longer starting for Luton and really doesn't offer anything, even when he comes in. If he scores you a goal, you never know. And it's he's guaranteed you a 1 point, spot from the bench. So I think that's going to be my move. I thought about Garnacho to take, an idea from your thought process about United. One, it just, makes me sick to my stomach to root for them, honestly, even for positiveness of my fantasy team. It also just, nothing will frustrate me more than seeing a United player sitting on my bench with 11 points. And I can just see that happening. I think I could live with the idea of, Sarabia. I also think I could convince myself if Sarabia had a really good matchup, say like a home matchup that I really love, I could convince myself to play him over Solanke. I could convince myself even to play him over Gross, maybe even play him over Odegaard at this point on a random match that it made sense. So I think that's going to be my two transfers, but I am going to hold off until at least closer to deadline to make sure that none of my other players get hurt. Because this is the thing, all that goes out the window if Gross goes down injured.
Right.
Or if Palmer comes off with a hamstring injury in the Chelsea match at the weekend in the FA Cup. And I do think, these teams are going to go for this FA Cup. So any recommendations you have? What are your thoughts on, outside of not wanting Holland for yourself personally, but with the idea that I am planning to go back to Holland, where would you look at somewhere other than Sarabia? Is there another lower mid? I think I'd have about 5 million or so to spend.
Yeah, I really like the Sarabia shout. I think depending on how high you are on Solanke, you could even toy with the idea of going up from, maybe not this week specifically, so I don't know if it's going to work out, but I think in general, like to the public, if you go up from Solanke to Holland, and that way you still have your 5 mids that you could use if you really feel better. It's all about, do you feel better with the 5 mids you have or the 3 forwards that you have? If you feel like Palmer, Saka, Sarabia, Gross, Odegaard can give you more than Solanke, Holland, and Watkins, then it makes sense to go up from Solanke to Holland, save yourself a little bit of money, and then maybe use those extra funds to move up another mid at some point if you need to. So just something to consider. I think something else that I like that I've been looking at is that Luton Luton will have a double game week. And I think if we're talking about a little bit of bench fodder potentially, or just someone to have, I think Alfie Doughty is a great person to look into because he flies down that left wing, man. And if they have anything coming from that side, it's going to come from him. And if they have a chance for a clean sheet, you still have that possibility there. And I think he's 4.3, 4.4, really cheap. So if you're kind of struggling for a defender, that might be a way to go for some people.
I almost picked him up a couple weeks ago, and it was the week that he scored the goal and got the clean sheet. It was just like I've missed everything by a week. It's been one of those years, and I think that's part of why I'm trying to I'm not gonna watch my rank drop because I'm gonna go a week without Holland and stash Salah. For me, it feels like it has to be Holland. Most likely for me, I probably will have to use my wild card to get Salah back. But I think a lot of people will. It's one of the reasons I wasn't afraid to take a hit this week is I think this will be one of the highest hit weeks of all season long. because so many people are moving off of multiple transfers. Like, there are so many people who have Salah and Son and are going to want Haaland in.
Right.
So a lot of those people are going to take -4s, maybe even -8s.
Right.
To pull that off.
There's no other way to fit them in without.
My problem is I do feel like the second half of this season is going to be extremely template. That, like, the moment these guys come back, I expect people to basically force Salah, Son, and Haaland into their sides together. And, obviously on my side, it would mean, Trippier and Alexander-Arnold going down to very low players for me to be able to do that. We'll see if I end up making that move. I really do think, though, that there are some fixtures in the next few, though, for Bournemouth that are really nice, and Solanke's at such good form. But I will say, I did think about that. I thought about going up to Haaland from both Solanke and Watkins, but Villa's fixtures are just so good over the next 5, 6, 7 match weeks. I just feel like there's a lot of value there, and I think that if I went off of Solanke, what will happen, though, is I'll still be frustrated that when and if I need to use a guy off my bench, I still have to get off Morris.
Right. You're still gonna be sitting on him at the end of the day. So I definitely.
And I guess I'm wasting a transfer then to go Morris to Lyle Foster from Burnley, which I will say I was extremely impressed watching him play last weekend when I watched some of that Burnley match against Villa. I think was it Villa they played?
Yep.
That guy, I know, and I don't ever make fun of anyone when it comes to mental health concerns or issues, because I give him a lot of credit. Like, to be a professional footballer and admit that you can't come to work because you're depressed and you need to get your head right, and you're like that takes a lot for a professional athlete to do at his age and in his prime. So I'm happy he was able to get healthy, but man, he's a different class of player than everything else Burnley has. You can see when people say, like, Burnley has these young players that are so good, you can see why they were so concerned with not having a turnaround and a timeline of when he would be back, because he means so much to them. Like, one part of it is he's the only guy with talent that can put a ball in the net. The other part is the alternate option is Jay Rodriguez. I apologize now to the entire Rodriguez family. Let's go to your side. 91 points, 86 on the safety. Talk to me about how your week went, what you wish you did different, if anything.
It's hard to say that I was a little frustrated given the week that I had, but I was a little frustrated because I should have gone Estupiñán instead of Alex Moreno, but for some reason, I don't know what I was doing. I was scrolling through some forum on Reddit, and someone made this big old post about Alex Moreno, and I'm reading through it, and I'm going, this sounds really nice. I'm going to go for Alex Moreno. This was right after you and I had talked about how exciting it is that Estupiñán's back, had that banger of a goal. Like, this guy, he's going to give you so many returns from that left side. And I bring in fucking Alex Moreno. And now it's going to be really silly if I go from Moreno to Estupiñán, because I wasted the transfer. I would have to take a hit because I already made my move.
You're wasting two.
Yeah,
wasting two
right,
transfers.
right. So unfortunately, that's where I'm on Alex Moreno now. There's nothing. I'm not going to change that because it's going to hurt me more if I do that. But other than that, in hindsight, playing Gordon over Bowen would have given me 2 extra points. Did that make sense at the time? No. So, I'm not going to go back and say that. My order of my bench, does that make sense? No. Sometimes I really do forget the order of the bench, and right now I should really be paying attention to it, especially if I am trying to really stay in this rank that I'm at for the rest of the year. But overall, obviously, like your team, Trent and Pedro Porro, had they returned anything at all, it'd be, I'm sitting on 100, right, which would be a fantastic week. But I'm happy overall. Can't complain when you go above the safety and you're having a good week.
What's your plan long term with Zinchenko, seeing that he's basically almost he's basically been dropped by Arsenal. Arteta has basically called him out, almost said like he's going to have to earn his way back in cup matches, and that they feel like they need to strengthen the fullback positions. Does that make you nervous, or do you think this is maybe them thinking they have to push him up into the midfield? Like, what is Arsenal doing? Because he's not working defensively, and it's
Right.
conceding goals, and it's weakening, basically all of their defenders from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah, I don't see him in my team long term. I think what I'm planning to do after AFCON and the Asian Cup is I'm thinking about doing the wild card around that time. And at that point, Zinchenko becomes a Stupinian. I could technically do it next week, given that I still would be fine with my mids where they're at. I'd be fine with my forwards where they're at. I'm not trying to move to Holland. So staying on Big Dom, Watkins, and Darwin makes sense for me to then use another transfer on a defender, because then I get that extra rotation. Depending on which of the 3 of the 4 defenders I like that week, then that's who goes in. And then, first defender off the bench is actually someone that I still like, and not someone like Zinchenko that's kind of hurting. And he's only going to go down in value. So I don't want to sit on it for too long. I want to try and stay away from the wild card as long as I need to, just because it's been going well. And I feel like in my head, I'm almost anticipating things going wrong. So I want to get ahead of it. But by doing that, I feel like I'll make the wrong move. So if I just want to stay patient, and eventually Zinchenko turns into a Stupinian, maybe next week, especially if.
Well, we lost Matouche there for a second. So whatever it was that he's doing next week,
You're never going to find out.
Up there, especially with next week.
Oh my God. Yeah. So because you made a very interesting point about the top managers just stashing Mo and or Son, depending on which one they want to stash, which one they want to keep. If I'm in a position where I feel like I can't pick between a city midfielder and Holland's going to do what Holland's going to do anyway, then I have the room to make the move for Stupinian next week and not have to worry about it. So that might be where I end up going. So long term, I think this is the look of my team, minus Son for Gross and Stupinian for Zinchenko. I think this is what I like for the next 4 or 5 weeks easily.
Yeah, I don't see anything that like screams work on it. And if you had to, if there's an injury or something happens, or you get fed up with Darwin, you can go somewhere else with it. You can do something. I personally, if I had Darwin, I would be banging him. I think there's going to be a shout to captain him eventually. I genuinely think his numbers are so good. And I know people are like, oh, this is the thing. You can't. All we hear about are all the it's this guy's world class, that guy's world class. Your striker has to score goals. He's a footballer. Like, they all play football. Yes, strikers score a little bit more than the other players, but they pass, they make runs, they all do different things. If I hear one more person make an excuse for Trent missing that shot against Arsenal or hitting the bar last week, and then people saying, but he's just a defender. Well, he's not just a defender when he lobs in the best crosses anyone's ever seen. We all herald him as the greatest player ever. When he hits a worldie, he's the next Steven Gerrard. You see the daisy cutter? It didn't get 2 feet off the ground. He hit it with, I still to this day don't think he was shooting that ball last week. I think it came off the outside of his foot. I honestly do. I don't think he was trying to shoot that against Newcastle. I think if it had gone in, he would have told everyone he was, and it would have been great, and I would have celebrated it like the greatest goal in the world. But if you're so world class that you have the guts you have the balls as a defender to take that shot, then you can get criticism for missing a wide open net 5-on-1. So and it's the fickle, unfair shit. Diaz literally had his first good 45 minutes of football in almost 6 months, and people went crazy about it. And Darwin literally set up 3 of the 4 goals we scored, and did all the work all match long to make Botman and Schär have to basically both focus on him the entire time. Yeah. What happened? Mo and Diaz ran rampant and scored goals and got penalties and created chances. But it's just like, it's this crazy narrative at this point. It's like, I want to be fair and balanced because I feel like I'm one of the most critical of Liverpool players of anyone on this channel. But I feel like I have to defend this guy because it's so over the top. And
Yeah.
I'm usually the one who's like, wait, I'll wear the critical glass. Like I'll say, no, that's crap. That's a terrible performance. Like, and I don't want to hear he's only playing, you know, for a fantasy owner like you, I'd keep him in my side because he's not playing because of a huge price tag. Jurgen Klopp doesn't play people because of price tags. If he had, he would have played Naby Keita for 3 years.
All right.
Trying to get him into the side, but he couldn't. He doesn't play guys for price tags. Like, and he's doing things on the pitch that make the manager think he is what is best for the side. And they're having such a great season without guys firing. Yet what we focus on is the one guy who supposedly misses, but also creates or is a part of like 40% of the goals we score from open play. I just don't maybe I'm too stats driven because of this game. And I'm looking at the numbers and I'm not, 5 posts is a lot of posts. But all these big chances are created because he's in the right spot and he takes the chance. They don't always go in, but he also puts the ball actually on frame more than most people. He creates saves by keepers. And it's baffling to me. I think you will be rewarded if you stick this out. If I were you, I'd be trying to stick it out.
Yeah, I'm not looking to move off Darwin. There was a little birdie in my head saying maybe Salah to Jota and then maybe going back up to Salah when he comes back. But
that's not a bad shout. It's not a bad shout at all.
Because you get some sort of Liverpool return there without having to worry about missing out on any points. I think the only thing that I am highly critical of Darwin is just him being offside too often. I think.
Oh yeah.
I think outside of that, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think he gets so much hate from our own fan base that is not deserved and not justified given what he's able to create. I think he could create even more if he takes one step back going forward. All he takes is just that one extra step every single time or the extra 2 steps. And if he just stays onside just a little bit more, I think we're going to see even better numbers.
Yeah, I guess my thing is like we always say, the numbers he is putting on enough to put him up with like most of the good strikers in the league. Yes, if he wants to get to the elite level, he's going to have to become more clinical and he's going to have to finish more of his chances. And yes, if Holland were presented with the 4 chances he's had in the last 2 weeks, he'd score 4 goals. But he also wouldn't have gotten 3 assists or tracked down guys or made any runs that made anyone better because that's not what he does. Like, and that's what's asked of him. So we're going to get out of here on this. The next match week is an interesting one. I am not a fan. I'm not going to lie. I don't like this half-assed. We have a half-week winter break, and this one fantasy week goes 2.5 weeks long. It's a 2 full weekend week. How will you approach that? And how many times will you check the live FPL standings on your phone throughout that week and a half to see exactly where you are and how far precipitously you are dropping for not pinging Holland back into your side and making him captain?
If Holland scores, I'm not checking the app. But if he doesn't score, then you can bet your ass that I'm checking the app. Because I think then at that point, I know that there could be something interesting going on there. But if he does score, I already know I'm falling, so I don't need to take a look.
It's a good point. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you for tuning in. As always, we appreciate all of your comments, feedback. If you aren't already subscribed, please head on over to the YouTube channel. Give the channel a subscription. Go ahead and like this show. Watch some of our reels. Check out our other programs. We're on every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, for the morning coffee show. Brought to you by our sponsors from Reckless Coffee Roasters. And then, of course, we're also on Monday nights, 8 p.m. podcast, Thursday night podcast, 9 p.m. fantasy show on Thursday. We have an EPL panel show midweek on Wednesdays at 9, and we're trying to get the EPL show back up and running with me and Pickler each week. which we drop live on YouTube. We'll be doing some more editorials and some more shorts and video content so please stay tuned. We also hope to get a lot more web content coming through the website, articles, and such. So, for all of us here at American Scouser TV, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. And we will be back next Thursday night to preview what we will be doing leading into the extra long match week 21. All right, everyone. Have a great week. Thanks for the ride.